If I had my way, everything would be so nice. This world would be like Paris. No, it would be a paradise. No one would ever have to say, I'm gonna get my wish someday. All one would have to do is say, this is my order, if you may.
Welcome to another episode of the School Without Walls. I am Dr. Anthony O. Hobbs, founder and host of this educational program. My guest is Mr. Roland Banks, educator, retired educator and administrator here in the Pine Bluff School District, and we're talking about the family as the foundation of God's creation, using Psalms, the 11th chapter and the 3rd verse as our reference. And I had referenced the father's role as a protector and a provider for his children. Tim, is that okay? So you can take it from there.
The father's role has changed considerably, even in the ideology about the father. Because we've gone to an egalitarian type family, and that's been over the last, ever since in the World War II, when women were outside the homes working. And to the extent legally now, women work and the fathers do housekeeping because they're unemployed. So they
reversed the roles, didn't they?
Conditions have reversed the role, plus legal movements toward equality has
of genders, right?
Has reversed the roles of the gender, but has not changed the appropriation of the genders in the family. The role of the church, you mentioned the role of the church. The role of the church is unique. One of the things about the church, and I like what James Madison said about the church when he's the 4th president of the United States, and when the same issue came up, and he's talking about the experiences of the church and the establishment, and he said, still the church remaining the purity and the efficiency of religion, we have the contrary operations, during which in the last 15 centuries we said the church has legally established a Christianity which has not been fruitful, more or less in places, because of pride and insolence, which means and insolence is really important. I mean, we don't really put out the energy to create the kind of progressive movement that is necessary. We simply depend upon, God to do it for us a lot of times.
And but without work, you got to work, right?
You got to work at it.
You got to work.
You got to work at it, because these progressive movements will create for you superstitions, bigotry in your situation, and that's one of the big problems why same-sex marriage has come forth. Not noticing it, not teaching against it, not teaching what the Bible says about it, and what humanity says about it, has caused us to get into the problem of equality in the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, where equal protection has become in question, and therefore courts are ruled based on law. Now, the other thing about it is that the church has a role, even in what is called separation of church and state. And that is to really stay out of the state, stay out of the business of the state. And you recall when the Herodians and the Pharisees were questioning Jesus, trying to trap him, and about the role of the government and the church. And he said, bring me a coin, which was a penny, and he said, render unto Caesar what belongs to Caesar, which is that coin, but unto God what belongs to God, because it's higher than the government.
Right.
So we got some necessary evils. Principalities, which are governments, are necessary evils. And they have good in them and bad. And that's because the fact that Adam ate off the wrong tree.
Right.
You see. Now, to make those into perfection and bring him back into the garden would make him like God. And that's what we're all working for, to get back there. But in the meantime, until we do get back there, we got to deal with all these aberrations that come out of the result of powers, movements, and so on. That's a part of the problem we face.
I think we should have about a half a minute on this side of the break. I believe Apostle Paul talked about principalities of evil, didn't he? Paul said,
Yes.
we wrestle not against flesh and blood.
Those are necessary evils.
Yeah, but those are necessary evils, those govern, those systems that man established, whereas the church got to work within those systems as a balancer, I would think. That's the church is sort of a balancer.
They're also ordained by God.
The church is ordained by God.
The church, the government's ordained
They
by
are
God.
ordained by God
God
also.
worked with the Hebrews and everyone else about to get the churches, get the governments going. But those it's like medicine. Any medicine you take has an adverse effect to it, and it's because we can't be perfect. We're not perfect.
Let us
Perfection comes in the resurrection.
Right, okay. Let us stop on that.
Me and my boy Matt had it good. He had catnip that was off the hook. But one day, he brings a girl home, and she's allergic to cats. Every sneeze was a nail in my coffin. Now I'm in a shelter. It's decent, but they don't even have Wi-Fi.
Don't let E. coli mosh with your food. An estimated 3,000 Americans die from a foodborne illness each year. You can't see these microbes, but they might be there. So always separate raw meat from vegetables. Keep your family safe at foodsafety.gov.
It's a short ride from your neighborhood to your naturehood. Find fun activities to do, like boating and biking, or camping and hiking, plus much more. To find a neighborhood park or green space near you, visit discovertheforest.org.
Those of you who have just joined us, I'm Dr. Anthony O. Hobbs, host and founder of this educational program called The School Without Walls. My guest today is Mr. Roland Banks, a retired teacher and educator, administrator here in the Pine Bluff School District. We're discussing the problems of the contemporary family. I'd like to mention before I get back to my guest is I take the position that it's a satanic movement, a spiritual movement straight out of hell, headed by Satan. The Bible says Satan is a liar, and he's the father of the lie. So those of us who are faith, I think we need to pray that God can give us what we need in order that we won't have to give an account of not doing what he sent us here to do once this journey is over. Back to my guest, Mr. Roland Banks. As you were saying on the other side of the break, you may continue.
We were talking about, really I got into separation of church and state, and I just quoted from Madison. I wanted to also quote from George Washington about this, and he said he was persuaded that the absence of religion in the Constitution, that the path to piety, which means righteousness, will require little political direction. In other words, if we could take religion out of the Constitution as a source of making decisions, separating church and state, then it would mean that it would be very, very little to stop us from going in the right political direction.
Let me ask you a question about that. Now, how can one do that? How can one who is religious and be a part of the government separate himself from what he is?
What he's talking about is the absence of regulations that govern the church.
Mm-hmm. Right, I can
in
see
other words,
that.
It's absent of regulation govern the church. And he's saying then that would simply mean that the Magna Charta and the Constitution should not have those items in there. That's how we separate it. But you can't really separate religion from the culture.
No, you can't do it.
No.
You can't do it.
You can separate from the body politics.
Right, you can write it by which it cannot dictate religion, right, like it did in Europe, right? But if you're a religious person, you're going to carry that wherever you are.
Yeah, but yes, but that goes back to our question and thing. What when you talk about Psalms 11:3?
If the foundation be destroyed, what
can the righteous do?
Mm-hmm.
The righteous, if we separate church and state, then it is not the righteous responsibility to go over and try to correct the government or have the government do its work.
It's not that church's responsibility, did you say?
Jesus said, give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and God what belongs to God.
Now, he was speaking of taxes there, wasn't he? He was speaking directly of taxes.
Taxes was a key representative of government, yeah.
Yeah, right.
So what he's saying, basically, the church's responsibility is much higher than that of the government.
I see.
See, government is one of those necessary evils you have. And then when you put that together, here's some of the things I think is important that we can do. One is, if you look at the case of marriage, we need to stress family organizations around marriage. You know, because you can do a number of things in the family without marriage.
For example?
Living together, two people making enough money to live together. You can organize families around criminal activity if you define it that way. So if you teach it that it is righteous that you appropriate gender
and you put together
marriage.
by God.
Yeah, and appropriate gender in marriage and indoctrinate, then you won't have the problem of a decline of marriage institution.
And you know, it's been like that since the beginning of time up until the last few decades. You know, when I was a child, a woman would look forward, a family would look forward to their daughters getting married. That was more concerned. They're more concerned about that than going to college, was getting a good husband.
Yeah.
Yeah, but now it's no more.
Well, she needs a good husband.
She needs a good husband. That's much more important than having a PhD.
That's right. A man wants his daughter to have a good husband, a working husband.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And the fellows who had the good jobs and the money generally got the best looking women.
That's true. That's true.
So the thing is, it was economics in the picture. So economics in the picture. So the question is, how do you deal with it? How do you foster a spirit of tolerance? Because you can't go in and legislate it out. You got to deal with it. How do you do it in love? And the way you do it in love is through education.
Through education, right.
Through education.
Through Christian education.
Christian education. And Christian education has got to be more than Sunday school. It has to be more than
11 o'clock service.
Wednesday night prayer meeting talk.
When only 3 or 4
we
people
got to have
come
Christian
out.
institutions.
Right, that's true.
That our kids can go to and attend where this indoctrination is taking place. You see, and that calls for money. It calls for developing the strategy for it, and it can be done in love.
Organization, leadership, and all those kinds of things are there. You know, when you made that presentation at our church, you made some most powerful things. Do you have some of that in your presentation today? I don't remember exactly what it was.
Scattered.
We have one more segment.
I have scattered information because I came with that concept. We're going to talk about same-sex marriage.
All right, and the family.
And the family.
Right.
And we veered off a little bit.
Right.
So I've tried to match up. I tried to answer your questions.
Okay. So look, we're going to stop for the final break. We'll be back in just a few minutes.
I'm one unlucky guy. The chance of being involved in a robbery is 1 in 757. The chances of being struck by lightning is 1 in 750,000.
Please fasten your seatbelts for unexpected turbulence.
The chances of being a victim in an airline crash, 1 in 29 million. Hey, could I get some peanuts? The chance of being involved in a car accident. If you are texting, your risk increases 23 times. Now, I may be an unlucky guy, but I don't have to be part of that statistic, and neither do you. Drive responsibly.
Are we there yet?
Yep, we're here.
It's a short drive from your neighborhood to your naturehood. To find a neighborhood park or green space near you, visit discovertheforest.org.
Those of you who've just joined us, I'm Dr. Anthony O. Hobbs, host and founder of this educational program, and my guest is Mr. Roland Banks, a retired educator, administrator here in the Pine Bluff School District, and we're trying to get some dialogue in the Pine Bluff community concerning the traditional family. As you know, that family has been redefined. We had 5 members of the Supreme Court in one vote change family from the tradition to same-gender marriage, which in my opinion was a move of Satan. So we want to continue with Mr. Banks on what we can do. I believe we stopped off on the other side of the break with Christian education.
Right.
You think that's essential, and that should come from the various churches. I understand we have around 400 African-American churches here in Jefferson County.
Right.
If we had the mind to work, we could put together a Christian school from K through high school and train our children the way that they should go, because we have so many young people. I work with young people every day, and a lot of them feel that it's all right to be homosexual now. They don't have to worry about a friend of the opposite sex. They can get their gratification right there in the dorm with their particular mates, if that's what they desire. And that's very wrong. It's very bad. So you can take it from there.
You mentioned the Supreme Court decision. Here again, we need to keep in mind that the accountability. That's one of the things that the Christian church has to be accountable. It's easy to pass the buck off to the Supreme Court, but the progressive movement for same-sex marriage didn't just start in June of 2016.
Oh no, they've been struggling with that for years.
It's been going on for umpteen years. But there were
centuries.
3 major cases that were heard from state level before it even got to the Supreme Court. And people didn't start squealing until they got to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court,
it had become law then, right?
well, yes, the Supreme Court had to rule on the law. The 14th Amendment and Equal Protection Clause. So what had happened was, before it got there, it had been established, the progressive movement had established that same-sex marriage was a class of people. It had to be a class of people. And as a result of it, 37 states had recognized that. So if in each state then is supposed to recognize the laws of each and every other state. That means if you married in New York to a same sex, you go to Arkansas, you're married. But some states pass laws which said no against that, and that's what the problem was at the court. The fact that it could be changed very easily by another court is possible, because what is happening here, you got a situation where the fundamental difference between this and say segregation or racism is that you're dealing with
agenda.
You're dealing with God's creation. See, and that's a high level of spirituality that the Constitution says that it's inherent, and therefore you may see a change in it. But the thing, I think what we need to do is, in addition to getting the educational part going, is that we have to look at teaching our young people, particularly in the black community, about co-parenting. Because there are so many of them which are not married, but if we can teach them to be co-parents, the young men to be co-parents with their children, to take care of their family, and
feel
work
a
with,
sense of responsibility.
That's right, accountability, and work with the female. That could easily bring folks together because that creates love.
Right.
The other thing that we need to do is teach that each gender, you got a responsibility.
Definitely.
And the male, you got to find a job, you got to work, you got to take care of your family, you got to take responsibility. You can't escape it. So that's part of co-parent. Now the other problem is communication. People are moving so fast in their lives, and their schedules are not managed properly, and therefore it creates a communication problem within the family.
Yeah.
And therefore managing the children is a serious problem. We actually allow children to become adults too soon.
Definitely.
Before they are adult age.
Definitely.
Yeah, because as soon as they can work at McDonald's and make enough money, some of these youngsters go out and rent them a house, and they create a family among their friends, you see, eventually. And so you got that. And the other one is managing the finance. And empathy for each other. That's lacking in a lot of situations. You know, when a man abuses his wife, he lacks empathy.
Yes.
He lacks empathy.
What about the other side of the coin? When a woman doesn't respect a man, do you feel that women do some things that cause men to possibly abuse them? Or are they completely innocent of it?
I don't think that a woman can do anything that a man can do. I think there ought to be a way to communicate.
That's the utopian idea.
Not
But
so
if a
much
woman
utopia, just
curses her husband
communication.
out and slap him beside the head, and he is not well trained, he's likely to slap her back.
That a
But
problem.
years back, they didn't do that. Women
Well, that's
respected
right.
the man, but they don't.
The man felt like he was a man; he could take it from a woman.
Mhm.
Now with equality, they don't take it. See, that's
Right.
that's the movement that's changed. That.
Yeah, it really
So it's
causes
an attitude
serious
thing.
problems.
And it becomes an ideology.
Mhm.
The other big thing which I haven't mentioned is media.
Medium.
Media. The media. MEDIA.
Uh-huh.
The media.
Mhm.
In our families today, the way we dress, the style of dress, hairstyle, you can sometimes hardly distinguish the gender appropriation.
That is so true.
Okay, so that means that we need to start drawing lines about the gender appropriate, what genders are.
We have 2 more minutes. We cannot be free, absolutely, can we, to do whatever we want to do?
No.
And again, we have 2 more minutes to close out. So I'm going to start my conclusion, my comments. Now, I want the people to understand that Mr. Roland Banks is my guest today, and he's a retired educator administrator here in the school system. We're talking about a serious problem. It's not just a problem here in Pine Bluff, it's a world problem in Western civilization. We're talking about the traditional family versus the various definitions of families we have today, and they are many. But I want you to make a note of this. Like you mentioned earlier, this doesn't just start with the Supreme Court's decision. Even back in Greece, they had the idea of lesbian came from Greece, an island in Greece called Lesbian, where the women just went out on that island with women, but that country didn't last long. That's what I want you to note. Greece is one of the weakest nations on earth today, and I'm afraid that if the foundation is destroyed, the foundation of God is destroyed, God would allow the nation to be destroyed. We should have about another minute. Mr. Banks, would you close out? We have 1 minute, and it is your minute.
I agree with your statement that if the nation, if these problems are not corrected, then the family will be destroyed. If the family is destroyed, the nation is destroyed.
The nation is destroyed.
At the same time, we have to realize that these are necessary evils. They are it would be one aberration of some kind of another. And we have to, our hope is in training our children at home and in institutions.
And don't forget out the word, the Christian training.
Yes.
You mean the Christian
along
training?
With the
godly training. Let's put it that way. Godly
Christian training along with the academics that they have to have. There's nothing wrong with having schools sponsored by, in fact, education started with the churches in this country.
I didn't want to leave it with just the Christian because Muslims have a nice educational system as well as the Jew. But I mean a godly education is what we're talking about, right?
Yeah, we're talking about academics along with the value training. You see, we could, you know, it's part of it. It happens in the church schools.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks again for being here with us.
All right.